And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you joined us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur and a health educator by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomena I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, interaction, and communication gap between fitness and wellness professionals and medical professionals. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest, most evidence-based, and most engaging information in the health sciences in hopes of allowing fitness and wellness professionals to have a long, sustainable career in the industry while helping many people at the same time. To do all of this in episode 37, we're joined by Marc Morris. This will be a discussion around marketing. And as many of you are well aware that listen to the podcast, I'm very interested in bringing in business and marketing to the conversation because ultimately, and we'll discuss this in the conversation with Marc, a business that is not profitable, a business that is not making any money is not a sustainable business. Therefore, it's a business that cannot help anyone. And that's what this conversation with Marc is going to be about, how we create sustainable businesses and sustainable revenue streams by way of marketing our services the right way. The way we message and the way we market in our industry quite often precludes us from being successful. In some cases, we don't simply do it enough and we don't ask for business. In other cases, we're talking about it and we're asking for business the wrong way. And that's a lot of what this conversation with Marc is going to entail. We're actually going to talk about some of the perils that fitness and wellness professionals have to endure in terms of marketing their services, and also how we use language that may not be conducive on a broad basis to the populations that we're trying to engage. This is a great lesson on the ins and outs of marketing strategy for a fitness and wellness business, ultimately in the hopes of making your business more profitable and more sustainable. Any additional information that we'd like to share from this episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 37. Please enjoy this conversation with Marc Morris. We're super excited to be joined today by Marc Morris. Marc, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I'm really fired up to get into this conversation because largely we don't talk a lot about business on the podcast. We have some episodes that are about business. And one of the goals of this podcast is to make sure fitness and wellness professionals can have a sustainable career in the industry, because you're not helping anyone if your career is not sustainable. So I think this is an important discussion. But before we dive into the discussion of marketing your fitness and wellness business, why don't you just give us a little bit of an idea of your background to provide some context?
You bet. My name is Marc Morris. I'm a nutrition and strength coach from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. In 2015, I finished my PhD in human nutrition. Evidence-based approach to all of these things are super, super important to me. But I knew from almost the start of my academic journey, I wanted to work with real people, getting real results and focusing on that stuff. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole of wanting to go to university, loving science, loving things that actually work, but wanting to work with people. And I think that the further I went down my academic path, the almost further I got away from what I wanted to be doing, and was lucky enough to kind of carve out a niche with weight class athletes, powerlifting, weightlifters, and nutritional approaches with them. And through that process, I was able to learn to market myself, deliver a quality service, and build out a business for myself that allowed me to be flexible, do the things I want to do, lift weights during the day, that kind of thing. And over the last couple of years, I've been teaching others to do that. So I'm excited to be on here and kind of talk about what I've discovered, especially coming from someone that really does value evidence and prides themselves on being an evidence-based practitioner, which a lot of times some of these business aspects are overlooked. And I think a lot of times when we think about the business and marketing aspect needs to be part of what we learn. It needs to be part of what we do. So thinking about it that way.
Yeah, that's great. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have this conversation, because you clearly have the academic background. You've also been in the trenches living this. And what you said there towards the end, I think is so critical, is that you've been able to build a business for yourself that is self-sustaining, that has allowed you to create a career in this which allows you to keep helping people. And I feel like the biggest thing that plagues our industry is that people who are passionate about this and helping people only stay in it for 6 months because they can't make a consistent income.
Right. And then it ends up being, I think a lot of us get into this stuff because we're passionate about it and we care a lot and we want to help people in the same way that we've been helped. But a lot of times, if we overlook some of those business aspects, we just end up with an expensive hobby versus a career that will sustain us, our families and stuff. Because you can't get, you need to pay your bills. You need to be able to take care of your family through what you do. And you can't do that if you're just focusing too much on just the helping aspect of people. And I think we're in this place where people are starting to look down on almost like antithesis of all this stuff is like the fit influencer type person that has this business, and the professionals are looking at them like eye roll. Why are they doing this? But there's lessons to be learned in all that stuff in terms of talking about our services, in terms of what people want, and not just what they need, but what attracts them to this kind of stuff and their pain points and all that stuff. So it's like, there's a lot of lessons to be learned here in terms of what do we need to do to get people excited about what I do, see the value in it, and be able to build a business around it.
Yeah, I love it. And I absolutely agree. I think, and I'm probably just as guilty of that as anyone. I see the fitness influencer on Instagram with the ripped abs and the perfect lighting. And I'm like, look at this tool. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. But then again, like, I look at how many followers I have on my Instagram, and you look at how many followers he has in his Instagram, clearly, like, he's doing something right.
There's something there, right? And I think it goes back to, they probably have they have a better understanding of what people actually want. And at times, is it realistic? Maybe yes or no, but there's things that we can do while still valuing evidence to position ourselves as the experts and show people what they really want is attainable through science and things that are realistic.
Yeah. I'm curious, before we get into the actual like tactical discussion of how fitness and wellness professionals do this, I'm curious what led you down the path of, hey, I'm a practitioner, I'm helping clients, I'm working with people, but now all of a sudden I want to help other fitness professionals build their business. What led you down that path?
Well, it's interesting. There's a few things. I've always loved the business side of things. Like I really enjoyed, money's such a taboo thing, but at times, like, I love building businesses and making money and bootstrapping things in terms of, like, minimal amount of capital and seeing what will happen. And I've tried a bunch of different things with specifically training other nutrition coaches with a specific lens on the business stuff. I remember at the beginning of my business, building out aspects of my team and going through the training process, be it with nutrition coaches or dietetics professionals, and going through the process of training them. And 3 to 6 months later, maybe it wasn't the best fit and I'd be left with nothing. So I more or less like flipped the script around. Let's take you through a program where you can pay me up front and I'll teach you. And then that aspect of it ended up taking off. People valued that even more than my business to consumer stuff with working with clients. People are like, no, I want to know that. And a lot of times the people that you see starting businesses around this stuff typically do it after they have a good working experience with a coach or professional, not an education experience. You kind of start to see the businesses grow and start because someone was like, oh, I finally see how you did that. Right. And I just want to, and it's never the right learning experience to gather that stuff when you're working with someone in a capacity where you're the client. It's just not the intent of that. So to be able to think of, okay, what's practical, applied, what works here, what can we do to focus on growing your business in an education experience, was what I really focused on, able to develop. And people are really, really valuing it because, as we talked about before, they're taking something that they're passionate about and now turning into a business that they can make money doing, as opposed to it just being an expensive hobby.
Yeah. The concept of an expensive hobby is, I think, a really salient statement to make, because I feel like that is what it turns into for a lot of people. And I think sometimes in the helping professions, we're led to believe that like profit is a bad thing, like making money is a bad thing. But in reality, if you're not making money, you don't have a business. And if you don't have a business, you're not helping anybody.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we started thinking about profit, especially people that are passionate about this stuff, They think about profit, and they start to think about those like the cheesy influencers in front of Lambos and stuff that like, is all flashy and just doesn't feel right and is scammy and stuff. But if you're using your passion and your skills and your knowledge in a service that helps get a specific result that people haven't been able to achieve on their own, and you can make money doing it, like that is the best of every world. And that should be viewed as that should be the target. That should be the goal. That should be what we're focusing on. And for some reason, like it isn't. It's almost like a badge of honor to do this for free or less money or low cost kind of thing. And that's just, number one, it doesn't work. It really, really doesn't. And I think everyone listening to this can probably think of that one scenario where they gave a discount or extended themselves for something that wasn't the true value and it didn't work out, because at the end of the day, people typically pay to their commitment level. And if that's not in line with what it needs to be, then it doesn't work for anyone. You end up resentful. They end up not doing it. So we got to think of all these things when we position our businesses, craft offers, that kind of stuff, because that's what actually works.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's dive into this. Okay. This is something you teach on a frequent basis. Obviously, you've developed a curriculum around this, and I don't want to ask too many questions. I'd rather just kind of give the baton to you to teach on this for a second. But in general, how do we start to think about the framework that you've developed and how you start to get fitness and wellness and nutrition professionals to think about marketing their business?
I think the biggest thing being, and what I've learned through this process, is if you're struggling to attract more paying clients and get more clients and grow your business, you typically don't have a really good understanding of what your client wants, which could be different from what they need. Like, for example, like we all know, like fat loss, obviously billion-dollar industry, like the weight loss industry is huge in terms of the mechanisms of how people accomplish these things. There's so many different approaches and stuff, but generally people need to be in a calorie deficit. They need to be eating enough protein. They need to do it in a slow and sustained manner. And they need to be doing some resistance training. Those are like pretty much the things, right? But that is how they go about doing it. But a lot of times professionals don't realize that the consumer really only cares about getting leaner. They don't really care about how they do it. And that's why Gwyneth Paltrow can sell whatever she wants because she's marketed as health. And like, that's why, people will buy an ebook for some fat loss approach that won't work at all, just because it's positioned to clearly articulate what they're going to get out of it. And a lot of times when people struggle, to grow their businesses, they don't understand what their client really wants. And they focus too much on the how of what they're going to do it from an education lens. And it never really lands, because that's not what people want to hear about. They want to be inspired to take action to change their lives. So if we can tell stories around that stuff, if we can make it really clear what we do and how we help versus the nitty gritty of the mechanisms of things and, how they go about it, things just land so much better. So I think a lot of times taking a step back and thinking, where do we start? We get a better understanding of what people actually want and what is going to inspire them to take action.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And I feel like that's a very challenging point for most professionals in our field to take, because we are so enmeshed in the how, and the how is the important thing to us because it's what we spent years and years and years studying and perfecting our craft. Is there a way that you suggest that professionals approach that? Almost, we talk about needs analysis in physiology sometimes, but this is a wants analysis. Is there a way that you suggest that people approach that?
Totally. And it's really, really simple. And most of the time it's directly in front of you. A lot of times, be it like in an intake process or an onboarding process or conversations with real life clients, they will tell you exactly what they want. They will tell you what it is in terms of the outcome, how it's going to make them feel, how it feels when they don't have it, the pain points around those sort of things. We need to listen to the people that we're working with and not what the textbook says, and use that kind of stuff to craft stories around it. Honestly, the answers are right in front of you. And a lot of times we think of, okay, so like Michael comes to me and is like, I'd really like to get 20 pounds leaner, which you don't look like you need, actually. Maybe that's a bad example.
How about 20 pounds bigger? 20 pounds more.
Yeah. So like, you're like, this is something that I've been working at for the longest time. And I know if I just gained 10 more pounds, I'd feel like so confident. I'd be able to do this. I'd be able to accomplish that. And this is the way it would make me feel. And I hear you saying this, But in reality, when I talk about this in my business and in my marketing and communications around what I do, I talk about the mechanism through which you would gain lean muscle mass. Mm-hmm. When in reality, I just got to tell the story of someone that's just like you, where they are, how they changed, and how it makes them feel. And it's going to inspire others to take action. So I think the biggest take home point is that like the stories are all around you. And if we can focus on listening to people and what they truly want, we'll get a better sense of what the consumer wants instead of what we think they want. And a lot of times our translation of what we think they want just doesn't land because it's our interpretation of it. And we're speaking not only like technically wrong, but like, it's just like, it's on the wrong level, education level and stuff. Everyone thinks, especially as you go down the academic path, you learn more about what you don't know. You become like, just wise to all those things. And you speak a language that our clients just don't understand. And a lot of times when you think you're simplifying it, dumbing it down, you take your, undergraduate level understanding it, bring it to grade 12. And in reality, you got to bring it to grade 2. You got to talk about, Michael, you want to gain 10 pounds. The best way to do this is this. I can help you do it. It doesn't need to be like intense, academic, in depth in that sense. So I think the biggest thing being like, people really need to get a better understanding of what people want.
Yeah. And people buy based off emotion, like without a doubt. And that's never emotion is never fostered by a discussion of physiological mechanisms of hypertrophy. Like no one I've ever sold training to cares about myofibrillar versus sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, but they do care about looking better in front of the mirror.
Exactly. And how that would make them feel, right? Yes. Is the biggest thing. And I think if you can highlight anything, it's like the transformative nature of what you do, and how you've helped people do that.
Yeah. You talked about something that I think is really interesting. And I just want to point it out is it's almost the curse of knowledge that we have as we become more educated, because you explain it on the level in your head, it's at the level you understand it. And then to your point, what comes out of your mouth is, oh, I'm going to simplify this. And it's still to a level that's beyond what that person could understand. So I think that is a really, really critical point that you made there. With the storytelling aspect, I'm very intrigued by this, because this is to some degree content marketing almost. You're not trying to sell somebody something with a specific call to action. You're just trying to show an experience that has taken place with you. Talk a little bit more on maybe how you coach people around storytelling.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of times, there's a awareness ladder around like what the problem is, what you do, and how you help people. And I think through stories, you're trying to highlight specific aspects of it. Like Michael has this problem. He wants to gain 10 pounds of muscle mass. He's not sure how to do that. So we talk about the problem and identify it as a problem. And then we talk about, what is the solution to the problem and the best way to do that. And we also talk about other examples of you being able to help that person. And then as you wrap, like you talked about, like a call to action. I think everything should have, when you want to be seen as an authority, you need to lead people to certain things. And it doesn't always need to be by this, but it needs to be, I need you to do something here. Mm-hmm. Be it share your experience, comment below, like do something so that I'm leading you down a path. And people get trained that way in terms of starting to make decisions around that stuff. So it's going down like the full circle of what it is someone's dealing with problem-based wise, how you solve it, and kind of going from there. And if we can use stories to do that, it's much more real. It lands better. Because specificity sells. People want to know, like people want to feel what other people are feeling, and they can see themselves within that story. So if we can use that framework of taking them down this entire awareness circle while telling stories, it always lands better. Because again, it's just one of those things where this isn't, when you tell stories, it's not your interpretation of what it is. It's what's happening. And those are the real live things that inspire people to take action. So a lot of times the best way to do that is telling a story of the transformation of someone. It doesn't always need to be like, it doesn't need to be literally physical transformation, but it's like what changed, where were they, how are they feeling? And then kind of going from there and telling that story. So that's like one of the best ways to accomplish that. I think it's like, yeah, it's just thinking about, I don't know. It's interesting. I always think about if someone's like, you only highlight the the success stories and the people of like, the powerful stories and stuff. You don't highlight the entire picture. I always think about like, what if they took like your U of M like graduate magazine or something and put like the dropout stoner on the front page? It's like that
Right.
story is not going to inspire anyone.
Yeah.
It's going to like tell me about the person that overcame struggle and found their way. And a lot of times they're not talking about what courses they took, right? They're talking about generally how this impacted them and where they are now.
Yeah, you said something a moment ago about the call to action, and it doesn't always have to be to purchase something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the concept of building value and trust in yourself as a provider and in your services before you go about giving that call to action to purchase. Because I feel like a lot of professionals, they're somewhat impatient, ironically, kind of like the clients we work with. Mm-hmm. They're impatient to make the sale. And I think sometimes they're very, very hasty in terms of how fast they ask for that sale. So talk about the balance between building value and trust by providing valuable content versus actually a call to action to purchase something.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the biggest thing being, and I don't want to contradict myself here, but there's two main things. The number one thing is a lot of times when people get in this educator mindset where they're trying to teach people, educate people, and provide value, they're not making enough offers. They're not saying you need to sign up for this. And I don't think you need to give people the option to do it in a specific way at times. It doesn't need to be every time, though, would be the biggest thing. And it doesn't mean that like you're taking someone down this exact path. It doesn't need to happen in a sequential order, but they do need to know there's an opportunity to work for you. And I like to think about that as almost like, we call that the coach for hire post. It's like, you need to make it extremely obvious what you do, how you help, and here's the next step to do it. So there's a time and a place for that stuff as well. But at the same time, I mean, you probably get DMs about this stuff all the time. Like you don't want to offer something to someone until they know you're a somebody, because it just doesn't land. But at times when people are starting to get curious about this stuff and have questions, you should probably also have a process to take them from interested to showing value in what you do through some sort of assessment or like consultation or something along those lines, so that you can show them the value of what you do before you offer the next step would be the biggest thing. But I think a lot of times, number one, people don't make enough offers. They don't make it clear enough. It's almost like, I like to call it hope marketing. You're thinking like you're just showing up, posting all your workouts, talking about stuff that's important to you. And you're kind of hoping people will connect the dots that there's an option for the next step. And that just doesn't work. Like you got to make it obvious. So I think a lot of times when people are struggling, they probably need to make more offers, but at the same time, maybe make it the offer to apply for this certain thing where we can talk about if it's a good fit for you versus buy this thing right now before I really know what's in it for me.
Yeah, that's great. It's a balance, I think. And I think you're absolutely right. I think in most cases, people don't make enough offers, but I think there are other people that are always making offers. And I think either pole is not an effective way to be able to run a business.
No, you got to be able to like layer it. And because I think that's probably the biggest thing. If you look at the established people in a lot of these areas, they will tell you, provide more value, give value, like educate your people, do these things. And they're not wrong. Like you got to do that. You got to be selfless. You got to be teaching people. They got to see the value in what you do. But at the same time, there needs to be an opportunity to take the next step. And because that's where, I mean, let's be honest, education's great. It's one of the most important things, but outside of our actual paid for services, people don't see change.
Yeah.
No one ever's like, I love that recipe you posted. It completely changed my life.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. And I've had Marc Morris, who runs Well Coaches, as a guest on the podcast before. And she often says, if education was enough, everyone in our society would be absolutely fine and be in incredible shape. So clearly, education is just the tip of the iceberg.
Completely. And ideally, if you can craft your education content around this is what is important, this is why it's important, and here's the next step, people will ideally take it and kind of go from there. And I think sometimes that next step can be, here's something that's free that I've created for you to check out, so that we can ideally build that know, love, and trust factor before I make some sort of offer.
you said something there really fast that I think is really important, and I'll have you repeat it and then teach on it for a second. You said know, love, trust. Yes. Teach on that for a second.
Yeah. So people, I mean, there's tons of people in this space, and a lot of times people think of it as somewhat like saturated, and there's so many people that need our help in specific ways. And like, we haven't hit the tip of the iceberg in terms of where this stuff is going to take us and that type of thing. So there's plenty of opportunity, but people need to know, like, especially before you offer them something, who you are. They need to know like how you help, like what's in it for them would be the biggest thing. They want to know who you are, because people are going to hire coaches and they're not going to hire programs or approaches. They want to know who you are specifically. So talking about yourself, like showing your personality and why people would want to work with you. And as well as like people need to be able to like you as well. So the biggest thing being like, I think a lot of people need to slap their face on everything. They need to show that this is the person behind these things. This is who's going to help guide you during this process and that kind of thing. And show, I think a lot of times people are afraid to show their weaknesses and strengths, quirks, all that kind of stuff. And in reality, that's gonna be what is going to help people take that next step. And at that point, they need to know that you are the right person to go on this journey with. So developing some sort of trust, be it positioning yourself. Like we teach an assessment process around new client stuff. And before I take anyone's money, typically I'll do some sort of assessment where I show them exactly what's holding them back from reaching their goals. So get a better sense of what it is, collect some data, show them objectively. It's like, in my experience, this is what I see. And this is what's going to, you changing this and putting this into action with the right accountability and support is going to get you where you need to be. Now, at this point, let's talk about coaching and how I can help you do that. But I can't do that unless they trust that I do have the solution. I am not just trying to take their money. I've done it with other people. And that's why social proof is really, really important, because no one likes to be the first person. Mm-hmm. And then kind of go from there. So I need to like show myself, introduce myself as who I am, develop the fact that I'm likable and I'm the right person for the journey. And a lot of times likable is such it's an interesting term. I'll talk with coaches that are like, I'm kind of no nonsense. I'm kind of no BS. I'm kind of, drill sergeant about this stuff. And I was like, you got to go down that path then. Yeah. You're not the empathetic coach, and you don't want to attract those people. So it's like putting yourself out there in an authentic way so you attract the right people, and then developing trust that they want to take this next step with you.
I'd like to take a quick break from today's episode to tell you a little something about one of our sponsors. As all of you are well aware, addressing the wellness paradox is a lifelong passion project for me. And when you're going to go on a long journey, it's difficult to go it alone. You need to find like-minded individuals that are willing to go on that crusade with you. And that's exactly what I found at the MRF Institute. The team over at the MRF Institute creates educational content for fitness and wellness professionals who are serious about becoming a part of our healthcare continuum. Getting on the healthcare continuum is all about leveling up our skills to be looked at as that valued resource provider. The wellness paradox is certainly an avenue for you to do that, but we need many different levers to pull if we're going to get there. And the MRF Institute is definitely one of those levers. You can go to their website, mrfinstitute.org, to find all kinds of great, informative, free informational content. And if you choose to engage with any of their paid content, they've created a coupon code specifically for Wellness Paradox listeners. You can enter in WP 2022, that's WP, and then the number 2022 to the website at checkout to receive a 15% discount on your purchase. I highly recommend you go check out mrfinstitute.org. Now back to today's episode. Know, love, and trust. I think that is a very, very simple but impactful framework. And the part of that I'm keen to talk about, I could talk about all three of those. I think the middle one is interesting because basically you're just saying, hey, genuinely be yourself, be who you are, show up in the world as you are. And there's a segment that will relate to that. But what I'm really interested in is the know part. And the reason I'm interested in that is because, Mark, there is so much noise out there in our industry. And especially the noise that seems to be the loudest is the least evidence-based noise. Example,
Yeah.
if I take out an ad that says lose 20 pounds in 20 days on Facebook, I bet you I get a lot of people to click on it. If I take out another ad that says lose 4 pounds sustainably in 4 weeks, I bet you no one's clicking on it. So how do you recommend that either individual professionals or even smaller evidence-based businesses become known with all the noise? What are some of the tactics and the suggestions you have?
Well, I think the biggest thing you can do is, in terms of the weight loss example, like a lot of people are selling weight loss because that's what a lot of people want. It's one of our biggest problems. It's one of the reason why that industry has grown so much is because it's very much a problem that people are dealing with. They haven't been able to overcome, and they want help with. Going down the path of like getting specific around the outcome and what people want. 20 pounds in 20 days. Who wouldn't want to do that? I'm like the most evidence-based professional you'll meet. I heard that and I was like, that sounds like I could get shredded. That sounds like, like it's ridiculous. But our mindset as consumers are like results. I could do the same thing with money and tell you like, you can make 20K in 20 days. And you'd be like, yeah, let's like, I don't care what it is. Let's do it. Right. Like I'm attracted to that. So it's still taking that lens of what's in it for the consumer and going about it that. I think the superpower here, and I think the characteristic that'll set people apart is who it's specifically for, and niching down that way sets you apart. So, because that way we can talk about specific pain points and stuff like that. So going both like demographically, but also emotionally and how someone's feeling, like we've seen more stuff going down the path of like, busy professionals, busy working professionals, busy accountants, like going down a path and being specific. And a lot of times this does lend itself better to the online where you have a larger reach in terms of who you can attract versus like a purely geographical service. But I think the biggest thing you do to set yourself apart is get more specific around who this is for and talking to them and kind of going from there. Because yes, 20 pounds in 20 days is, from the consumer perspective, really appealing, but it's not very specific in terms of who it's for. So, like niching down and kind of going from there, like busy moms, for example, that finally want to put their health first, take care of themselves. Like a specific example of the things that they deal with is like, I'm going to buy my kids shoes, but I'm not going to put money into my health. And that constant mom guilt around that kind of stuff, like those situations. So approaching that stuff from an authentic way and talking about it, why you should value yourself and how much better it'll be for everyone, and getting specific around it is one of the best things you can do.
In that case, you're recommending that people become more specialists than generalists. Is that generally your suggestion?
Yes. In terms of, especially around marketing. And the interesting thing is when we talk about this, like want versus need, the back end of your fulfillment doesn't need to look all that different. Like, yes, you get more reps around who it is you're helping and the stuff that they're dealing with. So you can get more specific in terms of how you help them. You just get better at it because you've seen it more often. But from the marketing lens, we get more specific and we don't really need to change all that much. But when you sell to everyone, you end up attracting no one, and it doesn't work. So the more specific you can be, the better.
Just like with training, I think everyone who's listening, who's a fitness or wellness professional, understands the concept of specificity, and you're just applying it from a marketing perspective.
For sure. Even like I'm thinking about like someone like everyone likes to think about like Brett Contreras right now and like where he's at career wise, and probably one of like the most well-known fitness professionals, also with an evidence-based background. But for the longest time, for like 10 years, it was laser focus around one thing. Yeah. And like to the point where people didn't know his name as much as they knew like the glute guy. Right.
Yep.
Right. So it's like it's really clear who he does and who he helps with. And that doesn't mean that like his training programs, although are glute focused, they don't have the rest of the stuff. They still do. Like they still do all that stuff. But for the longest time, it's getting super specific around, who this is for, who it helps, and crafting around that. And the fulfillment can stay more or less the same. And I know for a lot of professionals that disconnect and separation can be tough to navigate, but it's one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, he's a perfect example of it, because as soon as you said Brett Contreras, my brain said the glute guy. And I think if you can get to a point in any business doing anything, if you're known as the that business or the that guy or the that gal, That resonates with people, and I think has a lot more permanence than just, hey, you're a trainer kind of thing.
Yeah. Go if you can go really narrow first before you go broad, you're going to set yourselves up for success. I think everyone forgets that like Amazon started selling books before they started literally curating a shopping experience to you where, they'll deliver everything to you as well as like media in your home and all this stuff. Like it was super specific at first.
Yeah, it's a great point. What mistakes, if there was one or two common mistakes that you see fitness and wellness professionals making around marketing, what are those one or two most common landmines for people to avoid?
So it probably goes back to like speaking at the level of your client. But what a lot of things people see is that they don't understand that they're not their market. So they talk about things that upset them and they're passionate about and things that they see wrong in their specific industry or approach or whatever it is. And the consumer doesn't care about that at all. And I think one of the best things you can do is I know online, like a lot of times when we do this stuff, we do it online, like our marketing is online. It doesn't always need to be online, but a lot of it is online. So one of the best things you can do is look around the proverbial room and see who's nodding their head. And if other coaches that are just like you are nodding their head and not the consumer, you're overeducating, you're speaking to too high of a level, and you're not attracting the right person. And we see a lot of that stuff. Like it's almost like in your marketing, you want to throw rocks at a common enemy where everyone's like, yes, don't like that. This makes sense. This is what I want, and kind of go from there. And from the professional standpoint, a lot of times we throw rocks at other professionals versus the things that our clients dislike. And it just doesn't land because they don't get it. They're like, why do I want to dislike this person? They actually seem, kind of charismatic, or this approach. It's like, that actually kind of sounds like what I want, versus that. And I think a lot of times that just confuses the end user.
Yeah, that's great. And you're so right about throwing rocks at other professionals, where there's so much tribalism that exists in our industry. And it's, I like keto sucks, keto's great, this, that, and the other. And it's just like, the consumer doesn't care about that. They care about what they care about, which is the result they're getting.
Right. And what the rock you need to throw at it is like what's standing in the way of them getting that result and what's common to them, not what's common to you and other coaches delivering this service. And that's what most people miss, is that they're throwing rocks at the wrong people. And all that happens is that like, they probably get that small dopamine hit because there's other people just like them that are agreeing with them, but they're not the people that buy stuff from us.
Yeah, it's such a great point. It's a perspective shift. We're coming out of the pandemic here, at least I hope. Obviously, our industry as a whole has been pretty decimated by this period of time, particularly for people who work in brick and mortar businesses. What are you seeing fitness, wellness, nutrition professionals doing right now from a marketing perspective that's unique and effective post-pandemic that maybe you weren't seeing before the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic has been such an interesting experience for me because when I started my certification program, my education program, I started in about 2018. So before the pandemic, and I had been doing everything just like this on Zoom before it, because I truly believe it was the most effective mechanism and most accessible and all that stuff. And I had been teaching online, or at least conducting my business online, since like 2010. So even people that live in Saskatoon, that know me, that I see in the gym, my coaching is always conducted via online communication, because that's when I have time for it. That's when I'm going to be able to look over things. That's everything in the right environment, set aside time. It makes the most sense and delivers, the best possible client experience. So I have been doing all this stuff online. When the pandemic hit, a lot of people were like, all of a sudden, hands up in the air. What do? I got to go online. And they more or less took a step in that direction in terms of, I'm going to transition some of my services online. But then when things started opening back up, they kind of regressed, or like went back to the way they were doing things for sure. And I think from a pandemic perspective, or even just like a bulletproofing your business perspective, I don't know if there's like tons of lessons learned. What I think a lot of people saw that was important is that instead of conducting my service in the exact same way, number one, there's ways for me to innovate and think of different ways to conduct myself and deliver different things. But also, I think the most exciting thing about it is that people started viewing their services as a way to deliver a specific outcome and price it on that, versus pricing it on per sessions or per, actual time for money exchanges. And I think that's one of the most important things we do, because that gets us out of this time for money trap and allows us to scale businesses and make more money and help more people, because we're no longer trapped in the same way of trading our time for money would be the biggest thing. So I think one of the things that was important about it was, number one, leveraging your services in different ways and innovating it so it's more scalable, but also starting to view it as, can I sell people on a specific outcome versus for what I do versus the old way of doing it, which is per session or per consultation or per meeting or something like that. And that's where I think we've seen coaching explode, because it's on that continuum. It's like, you have this specific goal. I'm going to help you do that. This is how we're going to roll it out. And the accountability and guidance are baked in. And it's more of a service where I guide you through the process. And there's that commitment throughout it. And that's what makes it so successful, versus you want this thing. What it's going to look like is you coming see me buy these 10 sessions, come see me. The onus is kind of on you to book them in and that kind of thing. And it just doesn't work. So I think that the biggest thing being like, people kind of learn to innovate. Like some did, others didn't. But I think the biggest thing being like, how can you innovate, deliver stuff based on what the consumer wants and what they need, which is a result, and start to conduct your business around that.
That's great. I love that you talked about going beyond the standard transactional relationship, because I think no lasting business relationship is transactional. You give me money, I give you fitness. You give me money, I give you weight loss. Is no way to establish a long-term relationship. You have a chance to really think about our industries strategically. Where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years? What's that time horizon look like in our industries?
Yeah, really, really good point. I think the biggest thing being, I think the online aspect of things is going to continue to grow and become more and more important in leveraging technology in different ways. And I think that was already occurring, but the pandemic just like expedited that. I think it just like added gasoline to the fire. I think it was something that was already happening, but now it was like, this is more or less a necessity kind of thing. But I think it's funny how like the pendulum swings at times. And I think what's happening right now is people are so quick to want to like automate and use technology and that type of stuff. And they're starting to forget that they're working with real life humans in front of them, regardless if it's or it's through email correspondence or like video stuff. It's like the same thing. So I think we got to remember that, like, even if we continue to go down this path where we're leveraging technology and going online and starting to market ourselves on a results basis versus a service basis, that we're still working with, real live humans and still developing and fostering relationships, regardless of where we are in the world or if we see this person or what it is. So it's going to be like a combination of people doing things. Like, it's really been cool to see that it's kind of outside of the conventional systems. Like, I know a lot of people like in insurance-based models and stuff work with people that really don't value what it is they do and are more or less there just because they need to be there or think they should be there, versus pay for fee service kind of thing. People paying out of pocket, I guess I could say, for specific results where they're committed and they want to do it. And to them, that's like, I think when people got a taste of that, it's like, man, these are the right people. These are my people. These are the people that value what I do and are going to listen and that type of thing. So it's like all of those things, a movement towards a more scalable, technological version of our services where we help people with our passion, but still focus on this like human connection component and attract the right people, so that our business continues to grow, is kind of like where I see things going, for the most part.
Yeah, human connection is not going anywhere, and I'm always heartened when I hear that answer from someone, because there's certain points in time with virtual reality and automation where you sometimes worry about that, but I agree, particularly for what we do, that human to human connection is so important.
Yeah, and even like, I mean, it's the tip of the iceberg around computational models and making decisions based on data. Like, this stuff isn't going away, and it's going to continue to get stronger and more accurate, but it still doesn't replace an experienced guide that knows you as like a human to human individual and can make the right decisions. Like my mind will go to this place all the time where I see someone develop a new nutrition-based app that's going to allow to guide the process and make adjustments and all those things. And I like Mark's, mind, like the dark place is like, why didn't you do this? This is like right up your alley. That makes sense. And I'm like, Mark, no, like think about what makes this work. Think about what makes this all work. And it's that like a human that knows you is guiding you down this experience and is, delivering on accountability and support and guidance because they know where you are and can take you down that process. So I think that stuff isn't going away, but it's still not going to replace the stuff that we know works, and kind of go from there.
That's great. Well, speaking of human connection, if people want to connect with you, where can they find out more about you and all the great stuff you're doing?
Yeah, no, I think I'm most active on my Instagram, which they can find me at Marc W. Morris, MARC Morris. My YouTube channel is also up and running, and I put out like a weekly video on how to market yourself, how to build a coaching business that allows you to make money with your passion, those type of things. So those would be the two biggest ways to reach me. I typically run my nutrition certification program around once a quarter. So I know that when this episode drops, we'll be looking at like springtime kind of thing. So if anyone's interested in any of those aspects or, wants to add nutrition coaching to their toolbox or talk a little bit more about business and marketing, I'd be happy to chat further through those ways.
Awesome. And we will link up to all that on the show notes page.
Perfect.
And that brings me to our last question, which is the question that I always end this podcast on. My area of passion is helping fitness and wellness professionals become a part of the healthcare continuum. And I view the wellness paradox as the gap that exists between trust, communication, and interaction between fitness and wellness professionals and our medical professionals. From your perspective, if you can give those professionals that are trying to get there one piece of advice to close off that gap, what would that piece of advice be?
I think the fitness and wellness professionals coming mainly from a place of passion and wanting to help and knowing that their clients typically want results is really, really important. And the evidence-based professionals a lot of times really want to uncover what is right and what is correct and what is safe and what is effective. And there's a space there's a space in the middle for both of us. Mm-hmm. I remember my first bodybuilding competition in 2013, going in the back room of the pump up room and seeing someone take a bite into a raw potato. And I heard the crunch and I thought, this has got to be an apple. And I hope it's an apple. And as I got closer, it was not an apple. It was a potato. And somewhere along the line, someone had told him that this is what he needed to do for whatever reason, be it like sodium, not processed, whatever it is that led this person down the path, because behind it was a specific result, which was essentially like winning in a championship or whatever it is. And that individual will do something. And that's kind of where we're on the fitness and wellness approach, is that they're a bit closer to what people want and what's going to work. And it's not necessarily always true. Whereas our evidence-based group and medical professionals sometimes are so far removed from what people want that I think we really got to communicate and meet in the middle, in terms of there's room for all of this in here. And if we can craft the right offer so that we can help someone, it probably looks like incorporating what works, but from the lens of what the consumer wants, and meeting somewhere in the middle would be the biggest thing. I think people need to go there and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Marc Morris, thank you so much for joining us on the Wellness Paradox.
You bet, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's been a really, really good chat. Anytime I get an opportunity to talk about this aspect of things, I dive right in because it's so important. And I know it is literally in most cases, the only thing that is holding people back from taking their passion and turning into something that will pay them and they can build a career around.
Love it. Thank you again.
You betcha.
Well, I truly hope you enjoyed that conversation with Marc as much as I did. If you found it insightful and informative, please share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares really do make a difference for us. Any information we'd like to share with you can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 37. Please be on the lookout for next week's episode when it drops on Wednesday. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Those reviews can make a massive difference for us. Until we chat again next week, please be well.